Hey, we're live again. This time we have additional support, additional help over here. It's me, Victor, Scott, as almost always, and we have Kostis. Kostis, would
Hello.
like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm
there
Kostis.
might be a person who doesn't know you.
I'm Kostis. I'm working for Octopus Deploy. Previously, I worked for a company called Codefresh, who is one of the main contributors to Argo. I'm also directly involved with Argo. If you have searched ArgoCD best practices, how to promote and stuff like this, I can actually bet that you have read one of my articles. But I have to say the project I really love is Argo Rollouts. So we can talk about ArgoCD as well, but Argo Rollouts, will remain to my heart. That's it.
By the way, the best practice for ArgoCD, use Flux instead.
Okay, we started.
This is actually brilliant because, usually we have me. I'm levitating between the two, so I tend to trash both of them equally, kind of, no grudge, specific grudge against any of those. Scott is very much on Flux side now. Now we're even. Now we have Kostis.
Victor, wait. I want to say something really important, and it will also set the tone for the discussion. I've been to ArgoCon for the last 3 or 4 years in KubeCon, and this year in Atlanta, there is finally a FluxCon. Congrats.
Yep.
FluxCon, yes.
It's awesome.
So now I'm going to join FluxCon and then about Flux. So go and do your talk. Submit to ArgoCon, submit to FluxCon, or submit to both.
But then there is also GitOps Con. I don't know anymore, kind of like.
No, that was pushed off to be its own conference.
To a virtual one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I love both projects. Go and submit your talks. As long as it's your favorite topic, I don't care if it's, Argo or Flux. If it's GitOps, they're all in the GitOps family. Go and do GitOps. That's the main gist. Go and do GitOps.
No. I'm now I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to write the same talk for both, just kind of like the things I hate
just switch.
And then kind of like ArgoCD for FluxCon and Flux for ArgoCD Con. Brilliant. Right, exactly. There we go.
No, I say public. Congrats to Flux for getting FluxCon as a real live conference in person. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, true. Okay, so everybody, you probably, if you're not here the first time, you know how it goes. We haven't prepared anything. You ask questions, we answer. If you don't ask questions, we close it. Sometimes unintentionally, like last week, everything shut down in 15 minutes later. Anyways, the first is not a question, but a comment. Finally, a guess who won't bash Argo. Exactly. I think that's, I'm not sure. Is that towards you, Kostis, or Scott? Kostis, okay. Now, this is a long one, which is hard for me to fully understand. Git Commit Push. SSH, other user identity name. Do you understand this one? Anybody? How to block users from pushing to Git?
It seems more like how to block users from faking the identity name and email ID.
But with a GPG key, they use a GPG key. How?
I don't know how is that possible to fake it with GPG key. Yeah. Unless actually you write your key on a post-it and put it on a monitor or something.
Actually,
and then you make a picture and ask AI to actually convert it into text.
No, let me say something more generic. So we need some more clarifications for this. Was this another employee or a completely, third party? If it's an employee, I can give you my advice. Please trust your developers. Create an environment where you trust your developers and you assume they are humans and they will do the correct thing and maybe they will do mistakes. If we start a discussion, how do I prevent developer X from doing Y? We will never finish, okay? We will never finish this discussion at all. So if this was an employee, create the correct environment in your company. If this wasn't an employee and it was some random person, you need better security practices.
That depends. You might be going to your company, especially if you're working in an office with the goal to do nothing. And then there are very, very secure companies that are so secure that prevent people from doing anything.
Yes, this as well. I mentioned it
Exactly.
sometimes people ask me, I want to prevent a developer from doing this in Kubernetes manifests. And my answer is, if a developer wants to do damage, they will not care about Kubernetes manifest. They will do the damage in the source code or somewhere else. So don't try, to look at your Kubernetes manifest. Kubernetes manifests are the things that supports your code. If your code has problems, you will have problems.
Yeah, and hopefully you're reviewing code anyways, right?
Hopefully, even the AI stuff.
Even the
Right.
AI.
Exactly. Which doesn't mean not to have guardrails. You have to have guardrails. We just can't go at it from the approach of how do I prevent developers from doing everything that they possibly could do wrong and thinking of them as malicious actors. We have to put guardrails to make them safe, but not as a way to limit them, but as a way to make sure our environment is safe. It's two very different approaches that we have. Like, one is very bad of treating our developers as malicious people versus, okay, how do I make sure my environment is safe and that no one's exposing something on HTTP out of the cluster and that it's all with, certificates. Okay, that's valid to put in a restriction around that, or requiring GPG keys. That's valid, right? I think that, but that's where I would just say guardrails are a good thing. Just not treating people as bad actors with no proof.
The way I like to explain it is that there is easy way to do security and there is hard way to do security, right? What you're explaining is a hard way in general, right? How do we make things secure without making everybody suffer in the process or be unproductive, right? Now, unfortunately, most companies do the easy way, kind of, we just put those rules and if so it happens that nobody can do anything, it's not my problem type of situation, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this one is probably for me, but anybody can chime in. What do you use to bootstrap your cluster for Crossplane, Terraform, or something else? Let me start by saying that Crossplane really does not make sense on a tiny scale, right? If you're having only one cluster, you might, and two databases, you might not want to go with Crossplane in the first place. So usually Crossplane is used on larger scale where how do you set up one out of many clusters is not the biggest conversation, right? It's not the issue itself, and you can set it up any way you like, right? It could be Terraform as well. The good or important thing is that once you set it up, no matter how you do it, you can let Crossplane take over that management of that cluster as well, right? So any way you like.
So the way that I do this is actually because everyone comes with their biases or their own experience from other tools, then tries to bring it. I start in the cluster API world, which has cluster cuddle move, which has that same chicken and egg issue. And the way that I do it is I spin up a kind cluster, install Crossplane, install my XRD compositions, all of that, create a cluster, install Crossplane then onto that, install the same providers, XRD composition, all of that, and then literally kubectl get, kubectl apply. Just take them from one cluster, put them in the other cluster, and then everything is great.
Exactly.
You just pivot them from one cluster to the other, and everything works from there. So that's
but wait, is the question about the cluster that is running Crossplane itself or for your clusters in general?
Yeah.
They are asking about the first cluster. That's a question.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is the first cluster. So what you do is you spin up a temporary kind cluster to create the manifest, to create that cluster that will run Crossplane, install Crossplane onto that, and then just move the manifest that you have in the temporary kind cluster to the production cluster. And then it becomes a self-managing cluster. The cluster actually manages itself through Crossplane.
Okay.
Exactly. There is a third option.
Like a cluster API management cluster.
The third option is if you want to give. Third option is if you want to give us money, and by us I mean Upbound where I work, then you can use managed cluster.
And get a hosted Crossplane edition.
Exactly. Yeah, and then I get my salary. That's important. Okay, another one, also Crossplane. Do you think it's viable to let Crossplane manage core infra part like shared networking, IAM, account, folder structure, etc., as opposed to TF for
Terraform.
landing zone and explain for workloads. You can. I think that Crossplane did this service to itself to being explained as a tool that manages infrastructure. I see it as a tool that manages Kubernetes. So Crossplane compositions are a way how to compose Kubernetes resources, right? And Kubernetes resources can be anything you want. It can be infrastructure, it can be workloads, it can be anything you want, right?
It can be database migrations. Database migrations. Think about this.
There we go, right? As long as you can manage something as a Kubernetes resource, and doesn't matter whether that something comes as a Crossplane provider or it comes as something else. Like you manage database migrations. Yeah, there is a Atlas operator, right? And then you can bundle that operator together with your application into composition and manage it, right? So yes to everything with Crossplane. That's my short version of it.
My one caveat on that would be I completely agree. Crossplane is viable to manage core infra and to manage apps and to manage anything that can be done through Kubernetes, as long as you are very proficient in Kubernetes. And the reason is that to manage core infra, which one mistake that you make can have large impact on your environment, you have to really understand what you're doing in the Kubernetes world in order to do this correctly. It doesn't mean that it's, that it shouldn't be done. It should be done. You just have to have a level of expertise in order to manage this correctly when you're dealing with the low-level core infra.
Yeah, just a short version of it. Don't even think about Crossplane if you're not proficient with Kubernetes. That's the short version. Just don't.
Yeah.
Where are we? Oh, yeah. I sometimes I forget. We have a sponsor in this video, and I'm supposed to explain what it is, but I will not do that today because I'm going to let Kostis explain.
This is a sponsor?
What is this sponsor about?
Okay, so this is a GitOps.
And how much were you involved in that something?
I created 90% of it. It's not me. It's not me like 100%, but I did a large part, and essentially it contains 3 courses: easy, medium, hard. So if you don't know anything about GitOps, easy is for you. If you know some GitOps, medium is for you. And if you want to go into really deep ArgoCD stuff, like how do I migrate applications from one ArgoCD instance to the other without any downtime, or how do you promote, then you go do the third one. I didn't actually know this, but it's amazing. Okay.
There we go.
GitHub
Surprise.
Certification.
You're not, I was hoping, I'm terrible at selling anything. Terrible. And I was hoping that you're better. You're not.
No, I can give like a small number. When we created the certification, they told me, let's make a certification. We had a goal of 1,000 users because it was the first GitHub certification ever, and we didn't know, if people wanted to know about this. So we created it, we launched it, and we got 14,000, 14x. The goal was 1,000, we got 14x. And initially it was free, like we gave, for free to the world, but now it's not free because of its success, which, I always think it's a good thing. Like if you cannot maintain something because it's too successful, that's a good thing. So there is a 50% code, but it used to be free. Yes, it used to be free. Now I'm finished.
So we bring you 50% closer by watching this stream.
Yeah.
No, if you have any questions, you are speaking with, one of the co-authors. So if you have done the certification and you want to ask a question about something, or say it sucks, or say it's the best thing ever, or say you loved it, now it's your opportunity to give real-time feedback to one of the creators. There you go.
Oh, I have trouble with audio. I'll put the next one on the screen, and then somebody take
we can
over
answer
while I
it.
figure out what's wrong with my audio. One of you
Yeah, put it on.
you two, just go and answer it. Oh, I need to remove the. There we go. While I figure it out.
So first of all, there is no cult of Argo. It's just, some people that love GitOps. Maybe you can ask this question if you are in the GitOps cult, because GitOps people have been, accused of being in a cult. So you could ask the same question for Flux. Now, the obvious answer is Argo workflows. Like if you love the Argo projects, a lot of people think that Argo is ArgoCD, but Argo is actually 4 projects. It's Argo workflows, ArgoCD, Argo rollouts, and Argo events. And if you don't know what they are, ArgoCD is the GitOps deployment tool. Argo workflows is a workflow engine that you can use for CI. So this is your answer. Argo rollouts is similar to Flagger. I don't know if you have talked about Flagger here. It's for progressive delivery. And Argo events, it's Kubernetes native events. So if you love Argo, you go with Argo workflows. But you can use GitHub Actions, Jenkins, TeamCity, Circle CI. ArgoCD doesn't really care. It will take over what is in Git and start applying it, and how you created the manifest, or how you committed the manifest, or how you changed the manifest is not really important. So check Argo workflows. That would be my number one answer.
Yeah, I would say if you're using ArgoCD, and you want to run a Kubernetes native CI, then go with Argo workflows, even though my personal choice is Tecton, which I prefer over Argo workflows, and it works with ArgoCD. But if you're in the Argo ecosystem, there is nice integrations and visualization and different, nice combinations of the different Argo tools. It doesn't mean that they don't work with other tools. But yes, if you're using the Argo ecosystem, and I believe there is an Argo Cult, by the way, just like there's a Flux Cult, and I am a cult member of the Flux Cult, 100%. But if you are in the Argo world, then Argo workflows makes a lot of sense.
And we are both members of the GitOps cult. Okay, the GitOps cult. Don't forget
exactly. Exactly. And the CNCF cult and the Kubernetes cult, and exactly.
Yeah.
There we go. The only cult we haven't joined yet is some Altman cult or whatever. There must be something like that as well. I know, yes. Exactly. Okay. We have a donation from Akiva. Thank you so much. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Akiva.
Okay, so next, any recommendation how to manage a production Crossplane cluster? Shouldn't it be a managed resource as well? Is there an option to self-manage Crossplane cluster and its configuration? I think that we partially answered. Basically, you manage Crossplane cluster like you manage any other type of resource in Crossplane. I strongly recommend don't do managed resources directly. Do compositions. Compositions help a lot, especially with clusters that are not a single resource. There's always more stuff there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Who takes ownership of Helmcharts of an individual microservice, dev or ops? Similar note, would individual Helmchart be stored in some repo as microservice? Same repo as microservice dedicated Helmcharts repo. Oh, I'll go for the second one and then let you guys fight for the first one. The second one, yeah, I definitely think that it should be Helmchart in a repo of the application that it defines, unless you have a Uber Helmchart, but then you should probably have it as dependencies and still have Helmcharts.
Wait, Victor. This question has a lot of assumptions behind it, and maybe we need to talk about the assumptions first. There's a big question whether you want your developers in general, forget about Helm, if you want your developers to know about Kubernetes, to become expert on Kubernetes, or you want to hide Kubernetes from them. That's question number one.
Wrong question. That's a wrong question. It's not the question whether you want developers to know, but it's a question whether developers want to know or no.
Yeah, when I say you, I mean your company or your team or your policy or, not you specifically. So that's one question. Then you can ask the same question for Helm, like if they want to manage Helm charts themselves, or what I suggest is to be able to help everybody. So try, to help maybe junior developers in a way where they don't manage Helm charts, But if they want to manage Helm charts, they should be available and they should be able to look at Helm charts and understand what is going on if they want. So once you have answered all these questions, it depends. Like, if you want everything to be in a single place, yes, place the Helm chart there, and you assume that people will want to know. If people don't want to know anything about Helm chart, you create an Uber chart, a super Helm chart, that only the DevOps /SRE / whatever team is managing, and developers don't know anything about it. Maybe they change some values. That's my recommendation.
So
we're gonna have a fight.
So I will say on this a few things. Number 1, don't use Helm. Number 2, don't use Helm. Number 3, don't use Helm. But if you have decided to join, let's assume that you joined the Helm cult and believe that Go templating is a legitimate template engine, which it isn't. Then my general opinion on that goes that it should be in most companies. In the end, microservices have 1 or 2 different basic flavors with changes of values. Values files should be in the repos by default with the application. The Helm chart, you should try and standardize on what a microservice chart means to you, and it should have the option of ingress yes or no. It should have different values of is this a front end or back end application. The developers should not need to care about Helm. Helm charts should not be in the developer's repo, but it needs to be very clear within the repo how they can test their application using that Helm chart. So the Helm chart can't be hidden from them. It needs to be a repo they have access to that they can test.
Yeah, we say the same thing.
So everything is testable, but it should not be in the repo for many reasons.
I strongly disagree. I think that, so when I work on a project, right, I want to run tests, right? Where should the test be? Somewhere else? No, it should be where the project is.
In your repo.
No,
exactly.
Same
I would like to build that something. Where should the Docker file be? In that same repo, right? And where should the Helm chart be? In that same repo? Now, whether that Helm chart references some other chart, go for it.
Hold on.
Right.
Victor, is the source code of React in your repo, or are you calling in an external dependency that is rendering your front-end application? React is somewhere else and you're bringing it as a dependency. Why is that any different than the Helm chart?
Okay. So you mean have a Helm chart that specifies the Uber Helm chart as a dependency? Then I'm in, yes.
And then you run your tests, but you're running your tests against a Helm chart that exists out there, that is the chart that you will be deploying with. It's the same thing as any other dependency.
Exactly. So just to be clear, whether I understood, you mean, okay, in a repo of an application, you have the Helm chart of that application, and that Helm chart might reference the Uber Helm chart as a dependency.
No. He says the whole chart is somewhere else. The whole chart, the Uber chart. No. It's what I said.
Your test simply points at the Helm chart
when I work with React, I have a reference to the library React or whatever it is.
Yes, and in your test, you have a reference with Helm install the chart, the OCI artifact of the chart. You have a reference to it, just like in your package JSON, you have a reference to React. Here in my test file, I have a reference to the OCI artifact of my Helm chart.
I can swallow that. Okay.
Victor,
I'm not
there is a big question. Wait. You need the tests in order to create a feature. You need the Docker file in order to build the application. Why do you need the Helm chart for local development?
To run it.
Why? It should be a Docker file. Just deploy it in your local Kubernetes cluster.
Oh, now we're going to have another fight. I'm not going
to... And then use telepresence or Octeto or Garden or whatever and use it on a shared system.
No. But how am I going to deploy something to Kubernetes cluster with only Docker file?
No, you don't do it. This is what I said. You use another tool to do it. You are changing a microservice. The microservice is in another system, maybe staging. And you use Octeto because I saw you had the owner here.
Oh yeah.
to do your local
but
development for
Octeto
the
is
shared
going to
system.
reference the Helm chart, no matter whether now aside the conversation where the Helm chart is. But
you don't need to
Octeto
know
is going
about it.
No,
You just
I
use the
don't need
Octeto
to know
CLI.
about it. Yeah, but I need the Helm chart. Right? Okay, it could be remote, but I need the Helm. I'm not going to reference in Octeto Docker file.
Okay, so just to answer the question, you should have an Uber Helm chart. It should be there for developers. They should be able to find it, to understand how it works, what it does. If they want for local development, they can take it. But you need to make a decision whether you want this as a requirement, like if developers need to know about it, or if you offer them another external tool or internal, and the Helm chart is only there if they want to know about it. Okay, and then everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Junior developers are happy, senior developers are happy, SRE team is happy. Do we agree?
Yeah. But outside, 100%, right? Outside of where it is, never hide anything from developers. They don't have to look at it, whatever that something is, but never hide anything. I hate when people say...
I think we agree on this. And
Yeah.
also on what Scott said, personally, I think that you can try customize for your own apps. And if you have Helm charts, keep them for external applications, like applications that you install the cluster. But if you haven't looked at customize, I personally suggest customize for your own applications. Like for the applications that your developers develop, check customize.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm personally
So
a
actually,
YTT
it's funny
guy,
that we
and I
had
know
a-
that you're a KCL guy, Victor, and you
It's funny
use
that we-
whatever is actually templating.
It's funny that actually we had a fight about what to do with Helm chart, and we all agree that we shouldn't be using Helm charts for our apps. So there we go. It's such a futile fight.
There was an assumption in the question that you are using Helm. Remember, I said there are too many assumptions in this question.
That's true. Quick question. Any tips on using ArgoCD SCM generator at scale? What is SCM generator, Kostis?
It's one of the generators that is scanning Git repositories in your organization or Git branches or a combination of those, and then you automatically create applications. So imagine I don't want, I have 50 microservices. I don't want to write 50 applications manually. I want an application set that is scanning my GitHub organization. And maybe I've said every repository that has this special name or special label, create an application for this. It's one of the generators. Yes?
Okay.
got
Okay,
it?
so yeah,
And
generates.
then you have issues because GitHub or your Git provider is rate limiting you and stuff like this. So first of all, answer right one, read the documentation because there are some settings there that you can change. You can change how often it refreshes with the requeue property. And also generators have their own webhook mechanism, which is completely different from the main webhook mechanism that ArgoCD has. So instead of having the generator polling GitHub and asking, hey, do you have a new repository? Do you have a new repository? Do you have a new repository? You can say to GitHub, whenever there is a new something, let me know. So make sure that you have covered these basics. But then I would say try to find an alternative because we had customers that they had the same issues, and after we explained to them how it works and they explained to us what they needed, usually they came back and they said, oh, we can do this thing with just the Git generator or the list generator or some other generator. For example, a quick example, instead of having ArgoCD querying all your GitHub repositories and doing something, place a list somewhere of your GitHub repositories and let ArgoCD scan them from there. That's my suggestion number 2. But suggestion number 1, read the documentation and understand. I actually think that specifically for GitHub, my colleague Reggie, who is also the one that releasing ArgoCD 3.0, is adding rate limits for GitHub in the generators. Okay, you can ask here about this. It's not there yet, but it's coming. I hope I covered everything.
Good. You should come more often.
But this was a question about Argo.
Okay, exactly. How would you recommend? What would you recommend? Would you recommend using logging operator to automate your Kubernetes logging pipeline? What is a logging pipeline? I'm confused today. It's too much.
There's
Everybody knows.
Logging Operator is a CNCF project that integrates
Yeah.
FluentBit and FluentD and all of that.
Is that the one that
for-
transforms logs? Is that the pipeline?
It does the pipeline between FluentBit and FluentD together and creates like a logging pipeline with multiple outputs and transforms and whatnot. But personally, I prefer just to use Loki and be done with it. And Promptail, I like the Grafana stack a lot. But if you're in the FluentBit and FluentD world, I typically just say use FluentBit. I don't think that there's a need in most cases for this very advanced logics that Logging Operator has. If you do need to start messing around with all of the configurations, Logging Operator is great. But I think that it solves an issue that many companies don't have that issue. They aren't at the scale or at the specific use cases where that's needed. And then it's just overkill. So typically I say only when you reach a certain level of complexity do you need something like Logging Operator. Otherwise, just use Loki or FluentBit and be done with it. Or OTel.
Okay, the next one. I have a Kubernetes 1.28. I don't even remember. What is the current version we're on?
133. So you're 133.
Yeah. So you're
so
five
out of
versions
support.
behind.
Yeah, so you're out of LTS. And any AI tools will give out recommendation to upgrade cluster version along with application YAML changes, steps, order-wise. I mean, AI recommendation, I might be misunderstanding. You don't need the AI recommendation. You should be upgrading your cluster in step with Kubernetes, kind of like. You shouldn't be waiting 5 versions to upgrade your cluster.
But if the
Especially
second question, if application YAML, you mean ArgoCD application YAML, this shouldn't need anything. Like it doesn't really care about the Kubernetes version. It should stay the same.
Exactly.
I don't think this is ArgoCD. I think this is like specifically like if I'm understanding this correct, it's like in the move to 124 or 121 when we lost Ingress V1 Beta 1 and everything.
But that was
V1.
before.
I think this is but we still have breaking changes now as well in versions. Yes, they're in more esoteric APIs, but they do exist, right? So I think this is more of like, are there any tools that will give me a recommendation of how do I upgrade in terms of like add-ons, the YAML manifest, what's deprecated, what isn't, what version to upgrade to, things like that, to create like an upgrade plan, if I'm understanding this. That's at least how I took it. How do I build an upgrade plan of my cluster and what's in it?
If you do without entering whether you should use AI for that, basically any AI agent can give you those recommendations. That's already relatively straightforward. You just need to instruct AI to iterate through, hopefully through the manifest in your cluster, instruct it to compare the versions, find the differences, blah, 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 and then do it. It's really, I doubt that AI will give you the guaranteed recommendation, if you change this, nothing will fail. But recommendation as to what to change, yes.
Right. I wouldn't use AI for this. I would use tools like KubePug, which are great for all the built-in tools by Ricardo Katz. That's like the best one to tell you this. If you're using EKS, things like that, which I'm guessing you aren't if you're still on 128, they have that built in. AKS have that. GKE have all of those like same checks that KubePug is doing built in. One of my biggest complaints, and there is a feature request out for this in the CNCF in Artifact Hub, and in Helm, actually, to be able to add like minimum, maximum Kubernetes versions or like what something has been tested against. Because the issue that we have is that there's no way for me to say in a standard way, this cert manager version, which versions of Kubernetes does it support? It may be in the release notes. It may not be mentioned anywhere. It may be on the README in some table. In this, we have to have a standardized way of doing this in the CNCF. And then once we do, we'll be able to extend that. But at least for core Kubernetes resources, the way to do that is a tool like KubePug. Don't trust AI on anything like that because you'll end up breaking your cluster. Because it'll hallucinate randomly.
And please don't upgrade production without checking it on staging or something like that. Just don't do it. Even if you don't have a non-production cluster, and assuming that you have everything stored in Manifest somewhere, it's relatively straightforward to reproduce your cluster, or even restoring a backup, right? Reproduce your cluster as is, run the upgrade, do what you thought it should be done, and then test it.
Exactly.
Okay, so can you explain what Crossplane is and how you might use it to provision a database like PostgreSQL on AWS? Also, how would you make sure the credentials are security handled and made available to an application running in the same cluster? So Crossplane has two major parts, one personally less interesting than the other. So let's start with less interesting. There are Crossplane providers, right? Crossplane providers are a way how to, when you install a provider, let's say AWS provider, right? You get Kubernetes custom resource definitions and controllers that allow you to create custom resources, let's say that match EC2 in AWS, and then when you create a resource, that resource will manage EC2 instance. I'm using it as example, right? With all the benefits that you get from Kubernetes, like drift detection, reconciliation, you can use GitOps, and so on and so forth. Now, the more interesting part, at least for me, are compositions. Compositions are a way how to create your own custom resource definition and your own controller that will abstract things for you, right? Or create new API endpoint. And you can create a composition. You can call it, in your example, it would be database, right? And then expose certain fields that you want people to use, like, I don't know, version of the database, size, what's or not. And then whenever somebody creates a resource based on that CRD, you will, through the definition in composition, you will say, oh, okay, so whenever somebody creates a database, I will create an RDS instance and a subnet and a VPC, and so, maybe a schema, for example, for that database and what's not. So compositions
Don't
are a way
forget a
to
DB subnet group, because you're in AWS and you need separate subnets.
I was about
DB.
to say F word as a reaction to that. Yes. So you create your own custom resource definitions and controllers that do something, and you define what that something is. We call it composition because in most cases you compose other sub-resources for that, right? Think of it in a similar way, like you have a deployment. When somebody creates a deployment creates a replica set creates pods, and so on and so forth, right? This is a way how you can create something very similar for you. Yeah, that's a short version. Scott, anything to add?
Yeah, in general, I completely agree. And I think that the huge benefit of Crossplane is not the managed resources or the providers. I think that that's a great thing, and each cloud differently. I'll say the best is probably Azure, then Google, and then probably some like random 3-person built cloud, and then some other like esoteric cloud, and then AWS, like way at the end. Have their own operators to create resources. So you have like the Azure Kubernetes operators, you have Google's one, and then unfortunately you also have ACK out there, which is the worst operator in Kubernetes. But you can use those, right? So that's not a groundbreaking thing that Crossplane does. The groundbreaking thing that Crossplane does is compositions and XRDs and being able to create your own APIs without needing to write code, without needing to maintain a whole code base with KubeBuilder and whatnot to build operators in Kubernetes. It's as easy as writing a Helm chart if you want it to be, using Go templating or KCL or YTT or Python or whatever you want, your logic, or plain YAML. So that's the real power of doing this. Strongly recommended.
I'm going to put the next question on screen and then let probably Kostis answer it while I get a charger for my laptop. Here we go.
Okay, just to say something on the previous one, check also the Atlas Go operator, which, as I said before, allows you to define DB migrations with manifests. So you can create an empty database and then take the Atlas Go operator and say, take this empty database and bring it to the schema I want and run, all the intermediate migrations. And it has fancy features. You can clone a production database. You can create a test database and check your migrations there. So if you haven't looked at the project, check it. Whenever I talk with people that ask about Crossplane, I also mention Atlas because it makes, a great pairing, create database, and then migrate it. Yeah. Okay. This is for me. Yeah, which Appset generator is your favorite? So coming back to the previous discussion, in ArgoCD, when you create ArgoCD, you install ArgoCD in a cluster, you then create applications, which if you use Flux, it's a similar thing to the Helm release or the Git release or those resources. And essentially, you define a link between a Git repo and the cluster. And usually, you don't want to individually create those applications. You want to automate them. So application set generators generate those applications for you. I don't have a single favorite. My favorite is a combination. Essentially, it's the combination of the cluster generator and the Git generator. So with the cluster generator, you say to ArgoCD, go and look at my clusters, because I assume you have many clusters, and make a selection of clusters. I don't know, choose all my production clusters, or choose all my European clusters, or choose my non-production clusters, or my AWS clusters. So from one hand, you have all your clusters for this application set. And then you have the Git generator, and you choose applications. And you say, choose all my customized applications. Remember, we love customize, that have a QA overlay. Or choose those Helmcharts that have this kind of value file. Or choose those manifests. And then create for me all the possible combinations. So if you have 5 clusters and 10 applications, you don't really want to manually create 50 application YAMLs. You tell ArgoCD to do it for you. You say to ArgoCD, here are my 5 clusters, here are my 10 applications, go and deploy those applications, those clusters. So start with Git generator and cluster generator, and after you have mastered those, look at everything else. Take also a look at the pull request generator, which is specifically for preview environments. So you can tell to your developers, hey, create a pull request as you normally do on your source code repo. And then behind the scenes, you will create a preview environment with ArgoCD that takes this pull request and deploys that feature on its own in an application. And then if they merge the pull request or they delete the pull request, then ArgoCD automatically says this application doesn't exist anymore, and it destroys it. So it makes things super easy for you, because you're just sitting and developers create pull requests. ArgoCD creates applications, developers close pull requests, ArgoCD destroys applications. So check PR generator. So Git generator, cluster generator combination, PR generator, and then everything else.
Yeah. I would say, just to add, my 2 cents on this, I like the PR generator a lot. I'm really happy the team at Crossplane added that into their version of the Flux operator as well, which is, I think, like a great thing. And I love seeing when projects take from one another in the CNCF and learn from one another. And I think the PR generator for preview environments is awesome. Except for that, personally, I don't like the idea of application sets and generators in general. And it has nothing to do with Argo versus Flux. I like being as declarative as I can in Git. And I don't like this voodoo magic that happens, that all of a sudden it goes and creates, and it goes and finds in Git what I have, and then it goes and does it in the clusters. And the second we start mixing these things, while on one hand it makes things much easier because I'm just maintaining one YAML file, and I understand why it's attractive to people, because it does make that easier. When I'm reviewing a change in the PR to my GitOps repo, and I see that someone just changed one little line, the fact that that one little line, I don't know necessarily to say exactly what in the world this is changing. Oh yeah, this is actually going to change everything in 50 clusters of mine. Because of that, I prefer to be much more declarative, even if it means being less dry. Again, it's differing opinions, it's different, philosophies, I think, of management, but it's like I was the huge fan of Jenkins X back in the day, never a fan of Jenkins. Jenkins X, though, not on the implementation, but on the fact of the reverse GitOps. where it did pre-generated manifests that got applied instead of applying a Helm chart or customize. Because when I review a PR in the GitOps repo, which has the already templated out YAML, it's much easier for me to know what changed, what I'm actually applying the diff is, versus, oh yeah, I'm changing Cube Prometheus stack from version 1.2 to 1.3 and having no clue what that's going to do in my cluster. The second I move to cluster generators, I don't know what it's going to do on which clusters even.
I feel that this is similar to what we were speaking before in previous streams when we were discussing basically my summary was, I don't care how you generate your manifests, as long as you output them to YAML and store them in Git, right? Use Helm, cool, even though I don't like it, or use KCR or use YTT, but not to store them as the source of truth, but to generate the source of truth, which would be YAML in case of manifests, right? And I feel it's the same thing for GitOps manifests, right? It's so easy to generate. Oh, you need 5 sources, right? 5 applications. Cool. Generate them, but generate them and store them as the final manifest rather than use them to generate it at runtime. To me, that feels the same as if I would be using Helm, I would be running Helm template all the time, right? And then pushing it to Git.
Right. I would love to see an Appset CLI of like Argo that would go and like based off of a manifest would go and read the repos, generate the applications and push them. Okay.
It exists. So like, it was added.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
I was going to mention that this is like a very familiar problem. I mean, if you forget about ArgoCD, as Victor said, you change a value file or an overlay and you don't really have the full picture. And there, my recommendation is, either you do everything in Git, or sometimes I like, in my CI system, in my preview, I have a small workflow that is running behind the scenes, and maybe it's running Helm template, customized build, or something else, and it creates the final result, so I can look at it. So one of the recent features in ArgoCD was exactly this, the capability to use the CLI to preview an application set. So as a quick advice, like even if you don't want to store the final thing in your Git, you can set up your CI system, and when you change something in an application set, run the CLI and attach the diff in the pull request. So by the time you review the pull request, you don't actually look at the single change. You look at the final render thing, and you see, I had 50 applications, and now I made the change, and I have 55. Is this what I want or not? And then you approve or reject the PR according to that.
Yeah. So okay. I love that CLI approach. I'm really glad that came in because that's awesome.
I have zero opinion about this one because I don't know what it is. What do you think about HP Morpheus? And I'm looking at Scott. Scott, you always know the things that nobody else knows.
So I know Morpheus a bit. I don't know Morpheus a lot. I know Morpheus a bit. I knew Morpheus before it was acquired by HP, or part of Morpheus was acquired by HP. It's completely unclear what happened in that acquisition. It's like part of it, but it's still its own I don't know. Morpheus is an interesting solution. I think it makes a lot of sense for like service providers. I really don't think that it is the right approach necessarily for multi-cloud environments. I think that in those cases, you're better off building something with like Crossplane or whatever that's highly API driven and less heavy stack, more traditional IT model like Morpheus is. I think Morpheus makes a lot of sense for service providers. It gained a lot of traction with the whole VMware acquisition from Broadcom, pricing, whatever. So Morpheus gained a lot of traction due to that. I can say that their Kubernetes offering was, when I looked at it, the worst that I had seen till today, and that includes EKS in its first year. It was really, really, really bad. And that was a few months ago that I looked at it. So please do not use its Kubernetes distribution. Like just don't. but for service providers, it does offer a great element to it. I'm biased. I prefer VCF and vRealize automation, or now VCF automation, when it comes to a multi-cloud portal in the traditional IT world. And I prefer things like Backstage above Crossplane as a UI and a strong control plane if we're talking about more modern mechanisms.
I saw your Kostis doing this. Does that mean that you've seen Morpheus as well?
No, I haven't, but judging from the things I hear, I just say don't use it.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
I'm experimenting with chaos mesh in Kubernetes. Do you have any advice or favorite chaos engineering tools for Kubernetes? I gave up on that a while ago, so I'm not up to date. Are you up to date, either of you?
I'm not. The tool that I used to use was killed and doesn't exist anymore.
Which one?
Mangle from Mangle from VMware. They had a great tool that I really liked it, actually, for chaos engineering. And then they killed it like they did with Octant and other great open source tools, unfortunately. And now KubeApps was killed as well. So unfortunately, some good tools are being killed these days. But unfortunately, I'm not enough involved in that area.
I have a generic comment. I think before you do any, chaos thing, you need to have a certain level of maturity that you believe that you are ready to go to this route. And I've seen several companies that, they are diving straight in and they haven't solved some other problems first that they are far more important. So it's great that you are looking at this, but have you solved everything else? Like, how you manage your systems, how you monitor your systems, how do you deploy your applications? Everything else works fine, and this is your final problem. Or you have other issues more important, and maybe, you spend some time there.
You'll find out whether you solve those problems when you unleash.
But sometimes
production.
Victor, sometimes when somebody says I deploy to production every 6 months, solve this first, okay? Solve this.
Yeah. The one thing I will add also, people talk about chaos mesh and things like that. They're great, but you also have to do human chaos engineering. And this is an idea that I heard of recently. Actually, the CTO at my company, Lev, mentioned this is a great idea. Take someone who's like that single point of failure in your organization, the lead DevOps guy, and just tell him, day off, you're not allowed to answer your phone for the day or any messages. See how the organization works without this person. Take away, make sure chaos engineering is not just about your applications. It's also about certain personnel. What happens if X isn't available? What happens if this person can't come, can't be of assistance, right? We have to play chaos engineering with humans as well.
It has a name. It's called the bus factor. Bus factor. If you have a company with bus factor of 1, the bus hit your guy, you have a problem. So search about this bus factor and make sure it's a high number.
Exactly.
Okay. How would you manage etcd for production Crossplane cluster as a critical component? Backup solution, inventory dashboard solution, sync etcd to an external database. I'm guessing that this could be interpreted as how do you manage etcd itself, or how do you manage data in etcd? The latter would be the restore, backup and restore, right? And manage etcd. I've been using managed Kubernetes without being able to touch etcd for a long, long time, so I don't know anymore how people manage etcds.
If you need to touch etcd, you're doing something wrong, in my opinion. Like even on-prem today, use kubeadm cluster API, whatever, they manage etcd for you. Like it's not like you shouldn't be, unless you're in the 0.01% of people that actually still need external etcd. And I have yet to meet any of those people. I know I have met people that believe they are in that percentage and they are not. Right? Then you should not be treating etcd as something special. Those that do etcd snapshots today and etcd backups, I don't understand them either. Just take Kubernetes backups. Use tools like Valero, Kasten, PX Backup, whatever. Depending on what you use, use. Valero is great from an open source perspective, and just back up from a Kubernetes perspective. It's going to be much easier. Restoring etcd is a nightmare. Don't do it. Just restore Kubernetes. Much easier.
Exactly. Okay. This must be you. Are you familiar with Flamingo, either of you? I'm just
Okay.
guessing what it is. And it
Yes,
doesn't sound
so-
good. Doesn't sound good,
So,
right.
Okay. So I liked Flamingo when it came out. Unfortunately, I believe that Flamingo is probably the reason that we've ended up going under. For many reasons. It's one of the reasons that GitOps Enterprise didn't actually succeed was because of Flamingo. Flamingo, in the end, is an abomination of trying to work together ArgoCD and Flux to gain the benefits of Flux from an architectural perspective while getting the better UX elements that ArgoCD has. So really managing Helmcharts as Helmcharts like Flux does, but getting the application manifest of Argo and getting application sets and all of that type stuff. It was cool. It's basically been dead for a while, though, as far as I know, and isn't really maintained anymore. So I would not consider it, considering that it's not really maintained. But
The answer
it was
to
a
the
very cool
question
idea. It
is
never reached
no.
maturation.
No, don't consider Flamingo. Choose either Flux or ArgoCD, and just choose one of the projects. That's it. That's the answer.
Right.
That was
Or
my
use
assumption. It
both.
doesn't feel right.
Right. Or use both. It is fine to use both. I know companies that use both, but not
lots of
for the
people do
same
this.
things.
Yeah,
Right.
but
Use FluxCD for the platform components, for all of that, what the platform engineers prefer. Who
And
are more in the
ArgoCD for
Kubernetes
developers.
world.
It's a very popular combo. Yeah, Flux for infra,
Exactly.
ArgoCD for apps. Yeah, you can do that as well. But every tool
Right.
has its own, isolated model. You're not confusing the two in any way, like Flamingo does.
Yeah.
I think we answered this, Victor.
yeah, there we go. I mean, I remember that I checked it a while ago and just couldn't know. Anyways, would you guys love a wrapper around black box exporter, a web interface to generate, manage black box exporter modules? What is a black box exporter?
Let's
Are you
search for
talking
it.
about the one that existed a long time ago that manages node metrics? And the name is very unfortunate because black box probably throws thousands of results of hundreds of different things. Anyways, I don't know what it is. And I assume by you typing that you guys don't know what it is either, so we'll skip. Would you recommend using logging operator to?
No, we have this.
We already had that one. Do you have any experience with TestCube or other testing frameworks for Kubernetes? I don't know about you guys. I tried to like TestCube probably a dozen times because I was many times pushed towards it, and I never understood the reason for its existence.
So I can give some explanation there. TestCube is part of a portfolio of tools and companies, but in reality they are a single company. And essentially they try to bring the knowledge they already have from the non-Kubernetes world to the Kubernetes world. So, when Kubernetes appeared, they said, what do developers need? They need monitoring, deployment, whatever. And when they reached testing, they said, let's build something specifically for Kubernetes. But maybe just going straight in and say, I will create a testing tool for Kubernetes is not getting to the value that you expect developers to have. I evaluated TestCube, and I have to say I evaluated it when it appeared, so maybe it had changed, and it was okay, but maybe as Victor, you say, I didn't see anything specific for Kubernetes, like what's the advantage, what's the selling point, what's the main property. So it's great, to have a checkbox and say, we do testing Kubernetes with TestCube, but okay, what's the benefit? And I remember, and I have to say again, maybe they fixed it. That they said for me, it would be great if there was some kind of operator of resource, something that I can define my tests in a manifest, run my tests the Kubernetes way, But last time I checked, it was a CLI. Like you use a CLI to do stuff. So you use a CLI before, even before Kubernetes. So I use a CLI before Kubernetes for running my test. After Kubernetes for running my test, okay, why should I do this?
But if we're not talking about testing locally, which we're not, right? But running tests in Kubernetes, aren't we talking now about Argo workflows at Tekton and what's not? Isn't that it? What's the difference?
Yeah.
For me, it would be great if you have some extra visibility, like Argo workflows and Tekton. It's a workflow engine. But let's say I want fancy test reports or test suites or a capability to see historical overview of what my tests are doing.
Yeah, but
this you have to create yourself.
I'm probably now throwing random things that don't make sense, but your testing tools that are independent of Kubernetes are generating those reports.
Yeah, this is what I said, that I don't see the advantage. Like I can do this already today with, Report Portal or TestNG or XUnit or SonarQube or whatever. So,
yeah.
But wait, Victor, the project is brand new. The company behind it is really working on it. So don't assume that what we say, today will be true 6 months after or 1 year later. I think you have a common here warning that if you watch this video 1 year later, just go and check the project again. Maybe they have done something else, something more exciting.
Maybe. Benefit of the doubt. Fair enough.
The only tool in the testing area in Kubernetes that I use at any level is Chainsaw from the guys at Kyverno.
But that's different.
Tool that's different. It's completely different, but that's the only tool that I found that has any value. Exactly.
Yeah,
it's the
testing is developer testing. It's testing developer code.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that I've never found any value in. That's why I'm saying the only tool at all in the testing space that I've found any value is Chainsaw. TestCube, I tried twice, gave up very quickly. There just wasn't enough value.
Follow-up. How do you expect developers to test locally? Okay, let me stick with the first question first before we move to the others. How do you expect developers to test locally? Do developers have any issue how to test locally? I mean, Go test, if you're using Go or Java something. Do any of you see any issue how to test locally?
The only question is, and where testing gets more challenging, is when you start dealing with distributed systems and you need different backends do you do mocking? Do you not do mocking? How do you test against different microservices, different backends, different this in microservice-based architectures?
Yeah, I think, Victor, in this question, test locally means integration testing or component testing or end-to-end testing. Unit test, just run Go test. We're finished with this.
So, you see, in that case, I have a very simple answer, is that I tend to run tests locally, tests that help me during the development, right? And very fast iterations, right? Kind of tests that run within seconds or maybe a minute. And then all that integration testing and I don't know what testing, isn't that pipelines? Those that run for an hour, I don't want to run them locally. Do any of you run them locally?
Victor, wait. You have a test suite. I will give you a real example, like Argo rollouts and ArgoCD, and I assume Flux is the same. You have a test suite, and yes, if you run the whole test suite, it will take 1 hour. But if I'm changing a feature on, Git synchronization, I will run the test suite for Git synchronization, and that test suite should take 10 minutes, not 1 hour. Then I will run it locally. Yes, after I finish my code, just as a final check, I will wait 10 minutes to see that my integration tests haven't broken, and then I will, commit and stuff. But I will make a choice and say, run this test suite. And this is actually a good advice, for everybody. Forget about Kubernetes. You should have test suites so that developers can choose what tests they want to run. If you have a single test suite that takes 1 hour, yes, nobody will bother, and you will let CI run this at the end. We know that.
Yeah. Okay, so it's something in between, kind of like too short for being executed as a PR, but longer than during the development.
You don't want to put up the PR and need to deal with the longer loop cycles of get it up to the PR, it fails, bring it back. It's much easier if you run it locally, get the failure locally and all of that. What I would say is that the key here for any of these things, because I also read the continuation of the question is like, do you do it containerized or in Kubernetes with or without Helm? Like all those questions. The way that I view it is however you're doing testing in CI is how you do testing locally. And the way you do that is by creating a task file, a make file, a bash script, a new shell script, whatever it is. And in the end, that is how you run tests. That will create a kind cluster, that will build the image, that will deploy what it needs. Whatever you're doing in CI to test is how you also test locally. And your CI pipeline should just be calling that script or task file or make file or whatever that encapsulates all the logic. If your application is running in Kubernetes, integration tests should happen in Kubernetes. That can be a kind cluster, that can be a remote cluster. The whole question of remote development could also come into this picture. But in the end, I believe that it is always better to test as close to the reality as possible rather than testing like when I'm building Crossplane providers. So I'll give a perfect example here. When I'm writing Crossplane provider, yes, the first test I do is I go run the Crossplane provider on my machine as I'm developing. But before I put up a PR, I build the image locally and I run it against my cluster. I run it in the cluster, make sure it works there. Only then will I actually commit that to Git and push it, because you want to test locally the actual reality of how it's going to run. And if it's going to be in a container in Kubernetes, run it in a container in Kubernetes when you're testing. But that can be hidden away through task file, through things of that sort, or just file. If I remember the other one that you've talked about, Victor. I'm a
just
task
file, exactly, whatever it is. Yeah. My brain misinterpreted. My brain sees kind cluster as not being local anymore, kind of like. But yes, I agree. I think that we have a bunch of other questions, but we're out of time, folks. So come next week and then ask them again. And be faster. Be faster. Don't wait until the end of the stream to ask your questions.
Wait, one more question, Victor. The next one. I really want to hear Kostis' opinion on this one.
Okay. Is the future Gitless GitOps config packaged in OCI registries or other ideas? And I will let Kostis go first, only because Scott called him out on this one.
So there is a context behind this. Actually, both projects, Flax has a blog for Gitless GitOps. You can read it there. And I think it's from Controlplane because it makes sense, for their kind of business. And also there is a similar effort for ArgoCD to use OCI registries for manifests. I'm not certain if it's already in the latest version or if it's coming. So if you're asking about, functionality, both projects will take it. I think it's too early to say right now. I can see some advantages. And if you look at the Controlplane blog, they have some great justification for this, but they look at it from the viewpoint of security. And it makes sense for them, in what they are doing. But I have some questions and some concerns regarding usability and regarding developers. I didn't say in the beginning, but before I, dealt with Kubernetes, I was a developer for a lot of years. And I always see tools that forget developers. Like they have, a great solution for SREs and engineers and whatever, and developers just don't like what they see. So I have some questions, like let's say I adopt Gitless GitOps. What do I lose as a developer? That's my question to you. Like, it should be, more secure, whatever. But can I, as a developer, look at easily the history, compare history, look at to release and understand what was deployed there when. If somebody asked me what you had in production last Thursday and how it was different than last Tuesday, how fast can I answer this with OCI registries? And how fast can I answer this question with just Git? So I'm not, answering this. I'm just saying, take a look at this announcement from the viewpoint of the developer, and you will find the answer yourself.
Yeah. In general, I think it's awesome to see, right? Flux started this. Argo also has added in the OCI support. It really started with Helm adding OCI support for the OCI registries, right? And I think it's great. I'm a huge fan of this, personally, because the way that I always do it is Git repos that have a GitHub action that on commit goes and pushes with pushes it to an OCI artifact with the SHA of the commit as the tag. And that way I get full traceability because whatever artifact is being deployed to the cluster is the commit that I just go to in Git, and I can go and do Git diffs and anything. And it just makes it easily deployable and relocatable and all of that stuff in the security of OCI. But I think it's too early for this, though.
Here's a question, or hypothetical, if it's too early. Would you still would you deploy OCI image but still keep YAML in Git, or kind of get rid of YAML in Git altogether?
No, so YAML exists in Git, but that's not the source that the cluster pulls from. So YAML exists in Git. When you commit it, you run the Flux CLI or the Argo CLI or auras or whatever you want that takes the folder of YAML manifests, pushes them into an OCI artifact in the registry, and that becomes the source that gets pulled down to my cluster.
Yeah, I expected a different answer from you, Scott, because I was ready for a fight, but I agree.
We won't say it's too early. That's the answer.
And the reason that I prefer that typically is that you don't have the GitHub rate limiting, you don't have all of that. Git was never meant to be the continuously pulled, registries are much better at being a cluster doesn't work without an OCI registry. Period. End of story. It can work without a Git repo. And therefore, because the OCI registry is critical infra for my cluster anyways, I'd rather get rid of one dependency that I need to be up for my cluster to work and just have it be an OCI registry. The source of truth is Git, which pushes to an OCI artifact, immutable, all of that. So it still follows GitHub's principles. It's still pulled. It's immutable versions. It's yada, yada, yada. We get all of the 5 principles of open GitOps. So we're good on all of that. But it's just not in Git. But my source is Git.
Exactly.
Always.
No, that's where I was going. As I said, I hope that you would go the other direction and say only images. Then I would be against, because
I don't have visibility. I don't
exactly.
Have
I don't want to unpack the image just to find out what's inside. Right. Nice.
Right. No. Yeah.
Okay, so boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, this is it for today. See you all next week. Cheers.
Thank you.